No maid lasted a single day in that mansion. Some ran out crying before sunset. Others swore the billionaire's daughters were cursed, 3 little angels with eyes too sharp and hearts too broken. But then, one morning, a woman named Kendra walked through those golden gates with nothing but her faith, her strength, and a secret pain of her own. And somehow, without even meaning to, she did what no one else could. She didn't just survive the day, she changed their lives forever. But what she didn't know was that the house would change her too. Before we continue, please remember to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel to have more interesting stories coming your way.
The mansion on Silvercrest Drive stood like a quiet kingdom, beautiful, spotless, and yet deeply lonely. Every window sparkled, every marble floor gleamed, but inside, silence echoed louder than laughter. For a whole year, no maid had lasted a full day working for Law Morgan, the billionaire whose name carried power and mystery in the city of Aurelia Hills. People called him brilliant in business, ruthless in negotiations, but few knew the man behind the walls. Law was a widower, raising 3 little girls alone, triplets who could turn a sunny morning into a storm within minutes. Zoe, Zara, Zane. 6 years old, identical in face but wildly different in soul. Zoe was bold, always testing limits. Zara was quiet but sharp, the thinker of the 3. And little Zane, the youngest by a few minutes, was tender-hearted, easily hurt and easily healed. Together, they were a whirlwind, too clever, too curious, and too wounded. Since their mother's death 2 years before, nothing in the house had been the same. Law tried to fill the emptiness with routines, tutors, expensive gifts, and the best child care money could buy. But every maid ended up quitting before sunset. Some in tears, others in anger, most in disbelief that 3 angel-faced girls could cause such chaos. Until the morning Kendra Johnson arrived. Kendra stood at the tall iron gates with a small suitcase and a quiet strength about her. At 35, she carried both warmth and wisdom in her eyes. Life had not been kind to her, but it had made her kind in return. She had grown up in the south side of Port Ellison, raised by her grandmother, Mama Jo, who always said, "Baby, storms don't break strong roots, they just make them deeper." Kendra had lived through plenty of storms. She'd lost her husband 5 years earlier in a car accident, and since then she'd been moving from job to job, doing her best to rebuild life for herself and her teenage son. Her strength came not from wealth or luck, but from love, the kind that heals even when it hurts. The gates opened, and Law Morgan appeared, tall and sharp in a dark gray suit even on a Saturday morning. His face was handsome but drawn, the face of a man who slept little and cared too much to admit it. "You're the new maid?" he asked, checking his watch without looking up for long. "Yes, sir. Kendra Johnson," she replied with calm confidence. He studied her a moment longer. "I'll be honest with you, Miss Johnson. No one's lasted here. The girls are difficult." Kendra smiled gently. "Children usually act out when something inside them is hurting, Mr. Morgan. I've seen that before." "You think you can handle them?" "I don't handle children," she said softly. "I understand them." Something in her voice made him pause, a quiet certainty. But instead of arguing, he simply nodded and stepped aside. "Good luck. You'll need it." Inside, the mansion gleamed like a palace, but there was no warmth, no scent of breakfast, no sound of laughter, only order and emptiness. Then, as she walked toward the staircase, a sudden crash shattered the silence. A porcelain vase lay in pieces across the floor. 3 small faces peeked from behind the stairs, eyes wide, guilty and curious. Kendra knelt and smiled. "Well now, that vase didn't jump off the table by itself, did it?" Zoe crossed her arms. "You won't last a day." Zara tilted her head. "You're different." Zane whispered, "Your voice sounds like hugs." Kendra chuckled softly. "That's because I've given a lot of them." The girls watched in confusion as she began picking up the broken pieces. No anger, no shouting, no threats. "You're not mad?" Zoe asked, frowning. Kendra looked at her gently. "I don't get mad at hearts, sweetheart, just choices. Did you mean to break it?" All 3 shook their heads. "Then it's just an accident. We'll clean it up, no big deal." The triplets stared as if they'd seen magic. For the first time in a long time, someone had forgiven them, easily, without yelling. Later that afternoon, Kendra hummed an old gospel tune while making lunch. The sweet melody floated through the air, soft and soulful, like sunlight slipping through clouds. Law paused outside the kitchen door. He didn't mean to eavesdrop, but something about that sound reached him, something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. When he stepped inside, the triplets were sitting quietly at the dining table, watching Kendra flip pancakes with wide eyes. No tantrums, no fights, just 3 little girls drawn to her calm like moths to light. Law's voice was low, uncertain. "How did you do that?" Kendra smiled. "Children don't need control, Mr. Morgan. They need connection." He said nothing, just nodded slowly, watching her as though trying to understand the warmth she brought into a house that had forgotten how to feel alive. That night, when the triplets finally drifted off to sleep, Law stood by their door, listening to their steady breathing. For the first time in a long time, the mansion didn't feel cold. Downstairs, Kendra quietly washed the dishes, unaware that she had just become the first maid in a year to survive a full day, and the first to make the Morgan house feel like a home again.
By sunrise the next morning, the Morgan mansion was already awake. The sound of laughter, small, bright, and unexpected, floated through the halls. Kendra stood in the kitchen, apron tied neatly, as she scrambled eggs and toasted bread. She smiled when she heard tiny footsteps running closer. Zane appeared first, dragging a stuffed bunny by one ear. "Miss Kendra, are you making the same pancakes from yesterday?" "Not today, sweetheart," Kendra said warmly. "Today we're making something special. Want to help?" Zane nodded eagerly, and soon Zoe and Zara joined, pretending they weren't curious. "Breakfast is not playtime," Zoe muttered, folding her arms. Kendra winked. "Who said anything about play? This is serious business. You can be my assistant chef." Zoe hesitated, then grabbed a whisk. "Fine, but I get to stir." "Deal." For the first time in a year, the Morgan kitchen buzzed with soft chatter and giggles instead of arguments. When Law Morgan entered, coffee mug in hand, he froze in the doorway. The scene before him looked like a dream, his daughters smiling, working together, and actually enjoying themselves. "Good morning," Kendra greeted, still stirring the eggs. "Would you like a plate, Mr. Morgan?" He blinked, still processing what he was seeing. "They're helping?" "Of course," Kendra said with a small laugh. "Children like to feel needed. Sometimes that's all they're asking for." Law nodded slowly. "I see." He didn't really, but he was learning. When the girls ran off to the garden after breakfast, Law stayed behind. He leaned against the counter, watching Kendra tidy up. "You've done something no one else could," he admitted quietly. "They've never been this calm." Kendra glanced at him, her voice soft but firm. "They're not calm, Mr. Morgan. They're healing. That's different." He frowned slightly. "Healing from what?" She looked at him for a long moment, then said gently, "From losing their mother, and maybe from losing a bit of you, too." Law's breath caught. No one had ever spoken to him that honestly before. "I didn't mean to lose them," he said, almost in a whisper. "After Anna died, I didn't know how to be both father and mother. So I worked harder. I thought giving them everything would make up for what they lost." Kendra turned off the stove, drying her hands. "Children don't remember the toys, Mr. Morgan. They remember the time." He looked down, his jaw tightening. "You sound like you've been through something similar." She smiled sadly. "I've lost before, too. My husband, 5 years ago." He looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes. "I know what it's like to try and hold everything together for someone else. But sometimes the best thing you can do is sit with the pain until it softens." The room fell quiet for a while. Then the sound of laughter drifted in from outside, the triplets chasing each other around the garden fountain. Law exhaled slowly. "You might be right about them needing connection." Kendra smiled. "You'll see, Mr. Morgan. Those little girls aren't broken. They're just waiting for someone to listen." That afternoon, Kendra took the girls outside for a walk through the rose garden. The air was cool and sweet. "Miss Kendra," Zara asked suddenly, "why do you always hum when you clean?" Kendra chuckled. "Because music keeps my heart soft. When life gets noisy, I hum until I remember who I am." Zoe frowned. "That sounds weird." "Maybe, but weird can be beautiful too." Zane slipped her tiny hand into Kendra's. "I like when you hum. It makes the house feel happy." Kendra looked at her, eyes warm. "Then I'll keep humming." They sat together under the big oak tree for a while, and for the first time, the girls started talking, really talking. They told her about their mother's laughter, her perfume, the way she used to braid their hair. Then their voices softened as they admitted how lonely they'd felt since she was gone. Zane whispered, "Daddy doesn't smile anymore." Kendra listened, her heart heavy. "He's trying, baby. Sometimes grown-ups hurt quietly." The three little faces turned toward her. "Can we help him?" Zoe asked. Kendra smiled. "You already are. You just have to keep loving him loud enough that he remembers how to love back." That night, Law walked past the girls' room and paused. All three were asleep. Zane clutching her bunny, Zoe sprawled across her blanket, and Zara curled up like a cat. But what stopped him was the sound of Kendra humming softly from the hallway, folding laundry with the gentleness of someone who understood loss too well. Law leaned against the wall, listening. He realized that for the first time in over a year, the mansion didn't feel like a place of grief. It felt alive. And deep down, though he wouldn't admit it yet, he knew. This woman wasn't just another maid. She was a miracle in motion. It started with a quiet cough. Just after sunset, while the mansion glowed under soft golden lights, little Zane sat curled on the couch, her bunny in her lap. The other two triplets were building a tower with wooden blocks, arguing over which color went next. "Zane, your turn," Zoe called. But Zane didn't move. She coughed again, harder this time, and her tiny shoulders trembled. Kendra looked up from the table where she was folding laundry. Something about that cough made her chest tighten. She walked over and pressed the back of her hand to Zane's forehead. Her heart dropped. "Oh, baby, you're burning up." Zane blinked weakly. "I'm cold." Kendra moved quickly, but calmly. "Zoe, Zara, can you please bring me that blanket by the chair?" The girls jumped to help, their usual sass gone. They'd never seen Miss Kendra move like this, steady, focused, but worried. Kendra wrapped Zane gently in the blanket and reached for her phone. She hesitated. She could call the family doctor, but she needed to tell Mr. Morgan first. She hurried down the hall toward his study. The door was half open, the sound of keys tapping filling the air. Law was buried behind his laptop, face lit by the glow of the screen. "Mr. Morgan," she said softly. He didn't look up. "Just a moment." "Sir," she said again, firmer this time. "It's Zane. She's running a high fever." That made him stop. He stood so fast his chair hit the wall. "What?" By the time they returned to the living room, Zane was breathing heavily. Law knelt beside her, panic flashing across his face. "Zane, sweetheart." Her voice trembled. "Daddy, my tummy hurts." Kendra placed a hand on his shoulder, steady but gentle. "She needs to see a doctor. Now." Law nodded, but his hands were shaking. I'll call the driver." "No time for that," Kendra interrupted softly. "I'll get her ready. You grab the keys." Within minutes they were in the car, Law driving faster than he ever had, Kendra in the back seat, holding Zane close, whispering soft words of comfort. At the hospital, the nurses moved quickly. Tests, questions, bright lights. Zane clung to Kendra's shirt, refusing to let go even when the doctor came. "Miss, are you her mother?" the nurse asked automatically. Law started to answer, but Kendra spoke first, smiling softly at Zane. "For tonight, I guess I am." The nurse nodded and led them in. Hours passed like years. Zoe and Zara had fallen asleep on a waiting room couch, their heads resting against each other. Law sat beside them, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. Kendra finally joined him, her eyes tired but calm. She said quietly, "They say it's a bad flu. She'll be fine in a day or two with rest and fluids." Law exhaled hard, rubbing his face. "I thought I was going to lose her." "You won't," Kendra said. "She's strong, like her daddy." He looked at her, eyes heavy. "I wasn't strong tonight. I froze." Kendra smiled gently. "You didn't freeze. You cared. There's a difference." He shook his head. "When Anna got sick, I told myself I wouldn't go through that again. And tonight, it felt like I was right back there." Kendra's voice softened. "You loved deeply, Mr. Morgan. That's nothing to be ashamed of." For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the steady beep of the hospital monitors and the soft breathing of sleeping children. Then Law said quietly, "You stayed calm. You knew what to do." "How?" Kendra looked down at her hands. "Because I've been where you are. When my husband died, my son got sick 2 weeks later. I had to learn how to be calm so he wouldn't see my fear. Kids don't need our panic. They need our peace." He studied her for a long time. "You really are something else, Kendra Johnson." She smiled faintly. "Just a woman who's seen a little too much life." By morning, Zane's fever had broken. She woke up weak but smiling, her small hand still holding Kendra's. "Are you staying with me?" she whispered. Kendra brushed a curl from her forehead. "Always, baby girl." Law stood by the doorway, watching them. Something inside him shifted, a quiet, unspoken realization. This woman had done more than save his daughter's night. She had brought peace into his chaos, and warmth back into his cold world. Later, as they drove home, the triplets dozed in the back seat. Kendra looked out the window, the sunrise painting gold across the sky. Law broke the silence. "Thank you, Kendra." She turned to him. For what? For not just being their maid, for being their heart when I couldn't. Her voice caught softly. You've always been their heart, Mr. Morgan. You just forgot to listen to it. He smiled for the first time in months, small, tired, but real. And as the mansion came into view, bathed in morning light, it no longer looked like a cold fortress. It looked like a home on the edge of something new.
The mansion felt different after that night at the hospital. Warmer somehow, softer. The triplets had begun following Kendra everywhere like shadows. They wanted to help her cook, fold laundry, even water the garden. Zane, still recovering, spent her afternoons lying on the couch while Kendra read stories aloud in her calm, musical voice. Law Morgan noticed everything. He noticed how the girl smiled more now, how the sound of laughter had become part of the house again. He noticed how, when Kendra walked into a room, even the air seemed to settle. One afternoon, he found himself standing quietly by the doorway to the kitchen, watching her teach the girls how to bake cookies. "Zoe, too much sugar, baby," Kendra said, laughing. "We're baking, not building mountains." Zoe grinned mischievously. "But you said sweet makes people happy." "That's true," Kendra said, smiling. "But too much of anything, even sweetness, can make you sick." Law smiled to himself. Her words, simple as they were, always seemed to carry something deeper. When Kendra noticed him watching, she wiped her hands on her apron. "You want to join us, Mr. Morgan?" He blinked, caught off guard. "I don't know the first thing about baking." "That's all right," she said with a teasing grin. "You can be the taste tester. That's the most important job." For a moment, it almost felt like a scene out of another life, a life where he wasn't the grieving billionaire, a life where he was just a father and a man, surrounded by warmth he thought he'd lost forever. That evening, after the girls went to bed, Law found Kendra sitting on the back porch, a soft shawl over her shoulders, staring at the garden lights. "You should get some rest," he said quietly, stepping outside. She smiled without looking at him. "You too. You've got those same tired eyes I saw on my first day here." "I didn't think anyone noticed." "I notice everything. Pain has a way of teaching you that." There was silence between them for a moment, the kind that wasn't uncomfortable, just full. Law said, "Kendra, you told me you lost your husband. What was he like?" Her eyes softened. Isaiah was light. He was the kind of man who made everyone feel seen, even strangers. We didn't have much, but we had peace. Law listened quietly as she continued. "When he died, I thought God had forgotten me. But then I looked at my son, just 10 years old, and I realized I still had a reason to keep going." "You have a son?" Law asked, surprised. She nodded. "Marcus, he's 15 now. Lives with my sister in Port Ellison while I work. Smart kid, talks big dreams, just like his daddy did." Law smiled softly. "You must miss him." "Every day. But I tell myself this, sometimes God sends you to heal one place so he can bless another. Maybe that's why I'm here." Law looked at her, the faint garden light catching the kindness in her eyes. He wanted to say something, thank you, or stay, or maybe something he didn't fully understand yet. But before he could, a small voice interrupted. "Daddy." They turned to see Zara standing in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. "Can't sleep," she murmured. Law opened his arms. "Come here, baby." She climbed into his lap and yawned. "Can Miss Kendra sing the humming song?" "The one from the garden." Zara nodded. So Kendra began to hum, soft and low, the melody wrapping around them like a blanket. Law felt Zara's breathing slow against his chest, her tiny hand still clutching his shirt. When the little girl finally drifted off, he whispered, "You have that effect on everyone, you know." Kendra tilted her head. "What effect?" "You make people remember what peace feels like." For a moment, they just looked at each other. Two people who had lost too much, now finding quiet comfort in the same place. The next morning, Kendra found something unexpected waiting for her on the kitchen counter. A small framed photo of Marcus that she'd kept in her suitcase. Law must have found it when the cleaners organized her room. Next to it sat a handwritten note. "Family is never too far when hearts are connected. ... LM." Kendra's throat tightened. When she looked up, Law was standing at the doorway, coffee in hand, watching her reaction. "I hope you don't mind," he said softly. "I had the frame cleaned. It seemed like something that should be seen, not hidden." Kendra smiled, blinking back tears. "Thank you, Mr. Morgan." He gave a small smile in return. "You can call me Law." She hesitated, then said softly, "Only if you call me Kendra." For the first time since his wife's passing, Law laughed a quiet, real laugh that carried through the house. And as the morning sunlight spilled through the kitchen windows, the walls of the Morgan mansion, once filled with silence, seemed to whisper back to life.
Spring arrived softly in Aurelia Hills. The trees outside the Morgan mansion were beginning to bloom, and the house itself, once so still, now echoed with laughter, footsteps, and life. Every morning, Kendra and the triplets started the day with a routine of joy. They cooked breakfast together, played gospel tunes on the speakers, and filled the air with singing. The mansion no longer felt like a museum. It felt like home. Law Morgan often stood by the stairs, quietly watching. For months, his world had been about business meetings and boardrooms. But now he found peace in smaller things: his daughter's laughter, Kendra's humming, and the sound of pancakes sizzling in the pan. One morning, he finally joined them at the table. "Daddy's eating with us?" Zane asked, eyes wide. Law smiled. "If there's room for me." Zoe giggled. "There's always room for family." Kendra smiled softly at that word, family. It was something she thought she'd lost years ago. Yet somehow sitting here among people she hadn't known a few months ago, she felt it growing all over again. Later that day, Kendra received a call that froze her in place. It was from Port Ellison, her sister. Marcus, her son, had been in a fight at school. No one was hurt badly, but the principal wanted her there. Her hands trembled as she held the phone. Guilt hit her like a wave. She had been here, giving her heart to the Morgans, but her own child needed her too. Law noticed her pale face when she entered his study. "Kendra, what happened?" She took a shaky breath. "It's Marcus. He got into trouble at school. I need to go home." Law stood up. "Of course. Whatever you need. Take the car, take time off. The girls and I will be fine." Her eyes watered. "I'm sorry, Mr. Morgan. I didn't mean for this to happen." He interrupted gently. "Don't apologize for being a mother, Kendra. That's who you are." She nodded, her throat tight. "Thank you." Kendra left that afternoon. The girls cried at the door, clinging to her legs. "You'll come back, right?" Zoe asked, voice trembling. Kendra knelt down and cupped her face. "Of course, baby. Family always finds its way home." Zara slipped a note into her pocket before hugging her goodbye. "It's a letter for your son," she whispered. When Kendra finally drove off, Law stood on the porch with the girls, watching until her car disappeared down the road. For the first time, they all realized how much she had changed them. In Port Ellison, Kendra walked into the school office to find Marcus sitting with his head down.
He looked up and froze. "Mama?" Kendra's heart softened at the sight of him, taller now, still with his father's eyes. "What happened, baby?" Marcus hesitated, then muttered, "Some kids were talking bad about your dad. Said you worked as a maid now. I got mad." Kendra sighed gently and sat beside him. "You defended your daddy. I understand that. But fighting doesn't make you strong, son. Forgiving does." He looked at her, confused. "But they were wrong about you." She smiled softly. "No, baby. They just don't understand what strength looks like. It doesn't wear suits or own mansions. It loves, it works, it heals. That's what I do." Marcus blinked, his eyes filling with tears. "I just didn't want you to be alone." Kendra hugged him tight. "Oh, Marcus, I'm never alone. I've got you, and I've got a family in Aurelia Hills who needs me too. We're all connected, son, all healing together." A week later, Kendra returned to the Morgan mansion. As soon as she walked through the door, 3 little bodies ran straight into her arms. "You're back!" they squealed. Law stood a few steps behind them, smiling, a rare, genuine smile. "The house hasn't been the same without you." Kendra looked around. The girls had drawn a banner that said, "Welcome home, Miss Kendra," with colorful hearts and stick figures. She laughed, tears slipping down her cheeks. "It's good to be home," she said softly. La nodded. "How's your son?" She replied, smiling. "He's learning. We both are." That evening, the house was full again of stories, laughter, and peace. Zara climbed onto Kendra's lap and asked, "Miss Kendra, are we your family too?" Kendra looked at all 3 girls, their eyes bright and hopeful. "Yes, baby," she said, her voice trembling with love. "You're my family too." Law looked at them, his daughters, and this woman who had changed everything, and felt something deep settle inside him. It wasn't romance, it was peace. For the first time in years, none of them were living in the shadow of loss. They were standing in the light of new beginnings. The Morgan mansion was no longer the house where no maid survived. It was now the home where everyone healed.
A year later, the Morgan mansion looked the same from the outside, still grand, still elegant, but anyone who stepped inside could tell it was different. Where silence once lived, now there was laughter. Where sorrow once lingered, now there was life. In the morning light, Kendra stood in the kitchen with a bright scarf wrapped around her head, flipping blueberry pancakes while gospel music played softly in the background. "Zoe, Zara, Zane, breakfast in 5, she called. 3 pairs of feet thundered down the stairs. Zane reached the table first, grinning. "Miss Kendra, I beat them again." Zoe rolled her eyes. "That's because you slid down the railing." Kendra laughed. "You slid down the railing?" Zane giggled, covering her mouth. "Maybe." Kendra pretended to frown, then winked. "Just don't let me catch you next time." Law Morgan entered the kitchen wearing a light blue shirt, no tie for once. He had changed, too. His eyes softer, his smile easier. "Morning, everyone," he greeted, grabbing a mug of coffee. "Morning, Daddy," the triplets chorused. Kendra poured him a second cup before he asked, "Big meeting today?" He nodded. "First time I'm heading to the office in weeks. I've been spending too much time here." Zara tilted her head. "That's a bad thing?" Law chuckled. "Not at all, sweetheart. I think I just realized I like home better than work now." Kendra smiled knowingly. "That's a good sign, Mr. Morgan." He gave her a grateful look. "It's a sign you were right, Kendra. This house didn't need more staff. It needed more love." After breakfast, the triplets ran to the garden with their art supplies. They were making cards for Kendra's birthday, though they thought she didn't know. She knew. Kendra always knew. Law lingered by the window watching them. "You've done something I couldn't, Kendra. You gave them back their childhood." Kendra set down her mug. "No, Mr. Morgan, you did that. You just needed someone to remind you how." He smiled faintly. "You really think I've changed that much?" She said softly, "I don't think, I know." For a long moment they just stood there in comfortable silence, watching the girls laugh under the sunshine. That afternoon, a visitor arrived, a tall teenage boy with kind eyes and a shy smile. "Miss Kendra," he called as he stepped through the door. "Marcus," she cried, running to hug her son. "What are you doing here?" "Uncle Joe drove me up, said I should spend spring break with you instead of stuck at home." The triplets rushed over in excitement. "This is your son, Zoe?" asked. Marcus nodded. "Yeah, and you must be the Three Musketeers." Zane giggled. "We're the Morgan triplets." Zara added, "Do you like pancakes?" Marcus laughed. "Love 'em." Within minutes, the living room was alive with chatter and laughter. Marcus played games with the girls, while Kendra and Law watched from the couch, smiling. They'd been talking about him for weeks. They even asked if he could be their big brother. Kendra chuckled. "Sounds like Marcus just got adopted by 3 little sisters." "Seems fair," Law said. "You adopted us first." Her heart warmed at his words. Later that evening, as the sun set over the hills, the family gathered in the garden for dinner. Fairy lights twinkled in the trees, and the scent of jasmine filled the air. Zoe stood up and topped her cup with a spoon. "We have an announcement." Everyone looked up. Zane grinned. "Today is Miss Kendra's birthday." The girls shouted together, "Happy birthday!" They handed her a big handmade card. Inside were drawings, Kendra, Marcus, and the 3 triplets standing together, with Law in the background holding a heart-shaped balloon. Above it, written in crayon, were the words, "Family isn't who you're born with, it's who helps you heal." Kendra covered her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. "Oh, my babies," she whispered, "this is the best gift I've ever had." Law raised his glass. "To Kendra Johnson, the woman who turned this house into a home." Everyone clinked glasses, even the kids with their juice boxes. Kendra smiled through tears. "And to the Morgans, for reminding me that love doesn't always end, it sometimes just begins again in a different place." When the night grew quiet, Kendra walked to the edge of the garden. The stars shimmered softly above. Law joined her, standing beside her in silence. "You ever think about the past?" he asked. "Sometimes," she said, "but not the way I used to. I used to remember pain. Now I remember growth." He nodded slowly. "I think that's what healing looks like." Kendra smiled. "It is." They stood there for a long while, watching the triplets chase fireflies, Marcus laughing with them, the night air full of peace. For the first time, every soul in that house felt whole. No one was running from sorrow anymore. No one was trapped in the past. They were simply living, grateful, healed, and together. The mansion on Silvercrest Drive had once been known as the house where no maid survived a day. Now, it was known as the home where love stayed forever.